Being a Splatoon fan is wild. We're gonna have 3 full games before Mario Kart gets a new entry after 8. But there's this weird feeling that we're being starved. We can thank that specifically to how Splatoon 3 is in desperate need of marketing that better expresses how different the game is from 2, but that's leaning into its own discussion. I need my own way to entertain myself until we get to 3. I have been playing the hell out of Splatoon 2, got my S ranks in everything but Clan Blitz, for easy reasons to explain, but I need something extra, so I decided to boot up my old Wii U with my copy of Splatoon 1. This right here is where it all began. The part I'm focusing on though is the single player campaign the game had. So far the most interesting part about 3 for me was the trailer for the new story mode, which just made me want to replay all the previous campaigns in the past games, starting off with Splatoon 1's campaign. The last time I fully played this whole thing was when the game first launched, all the way back in 2015. God, it boggles my mind how fast time flies. Probably part of the reason I only played it once is that you have only one save file per profile, and my dumb 6th grader brain didn't know how to make anymore. Yeah, well 18-year-old me has it figured out now, and Luigi has taken the helm as my second profile. Wow, the Wii U menu now looks so desolate ever since Miiverse got shut down. It was so much fun seeing all the weird and cute posts people would make, and no longer having that in one doesn't feel right. Say what you want about the Wii U, but it had way more personality than the Switch ever had. Back on topic though, starting a fresh file and getting back to Angopolis Square doesn't take too long, and the story mode technically begins with the first news broadcast from the Squid Sisters. The Great Zapfish, which is the source of power for Angopolis, has mysteriously vanished, and the only clue to go off of is the recent UFO sighting. And with this massive report that could lead to a crisis throughout the whole city, society kinda stops caring immediately, which is unsurprisingly accurate. If we want to do something about it, however, all we have to do is follow this weird old dude down into this manhole he popped out of. Anyone ever vibe on these poles? Never mind. It's here that we arrive in Octo Canyon and meet everyone's favorite crazy old squid, Captain Cuttlefish, the leader of the Squidbeaks platoon during the Great Turf War of 100 years ago. He believes the Octarians are the ones who stole the Great Zapfish as revenge for the war, but nobody believes him except supposedly us. He asks that we join his new Squidbeaks platoon in order to steal back the Great Zapfish, and we just say nothing, which translates as a yes. And with that, Agent 3 is born, a squid of few words but becomes the veteran agent of the Splatoon canon. They can be any gender you want, but since my main file is a boy, I went with a girl. That's also seemingly the accepted gender by the community based on the promotion art for the games. Equipped with a hero shot, our journey begins with the starting area consisting of 3 levels to show us the ropes. The structure consists of linear levels that are accessed through painting these kettles and diving in. While the multiplayer of Splatoon uses its gameplay mechanics to make a team-based shooter, the single player of Splatoon is more like a 3D platformer. The goal of each level is to make it to the end and collect the mini Zapfish. You'll be going through linear platforming obstacles with a bunch of Octarians acting as the enemies, starting off with the basic Octo Troopers, who are easy enemies that'll move slowly and only launch slow-moving projectiles. Some will be shielded, but all you gotta do is throw a bomb and boom, there's your opening. Pretty much your training for dealing with any other enemy. You're taken from section to section using these launch pads that'll have you flying across the sky to your destination, just like squid jumping in the main game, and it's always a fun spectacle each time you do it. Eggs act as your main collectible, which can also be found in crates all over the place. The first 3 levels of Octo Valley are your basic tutorial for playing Splatoon, but I will admit, it's still fun to go through. They're easy as hell, but still have a satisfying gameplay loop to them. After those stages are over, there's the first boss, the Octo Stomp. All you really gotta do is wait for it to stomp and then climb your way on top of it to shoot its giant tentacle. Do that 3 more times and that's the fight. It's really easy, but teaches you the basic skills of climbing up walls. The thing has fabulous legs, by the way. Once that's done, the pathway to the next area opens up, and that's pretty much the loop for single player, just with 6 levels per area now. Jumping back to levels, they were really enjoyable to go back to. There's enough to a level design to keep me invested. The main reason for that is that there are many different mechanics exclusive to this mode, and each level will be based around one of them. Floating Sponge Garden is centered around these sponges that grow in size when you ink them. You gotta keep doing this to platform through the level, but enemy shots are also capable of shrinking them, so you gotta watch out for that. Oh dude, one of my favorite levels in this game is the one based around terrain that you can only see when it's inked. You'll be going through completely invisible walkways in the air as you figure out where you're supposed to go. The level immediately starts with one of these balloon fish, which you pop to reveal the whole gimmick of the level, and then it has you fighting enemies who can also reveal where the terrain is, eventually throwing squeegees into the mix. It's a really creative level. These ink rails as well are really fun. They're lines of ink that you can freely move through to reach different points of a level, and jump out immediately to begin shooting again in kid form. It's like a faster version of a tightrope, but the animation behind it makes it feel really good to flow through. Not every mechanic is super creative. You got some levels that are based around simpler things, like spinning platforms or propellers that move platforms when you shoot them, but they all have a good sense of progression in the levels. It's that game design thing people have probably heard about, where they introduce a mechanic in a very safe way, and then make it more complex as the level goes on. That mentality is definitely there for the stages of Octo Valley, and it does it really well. Unfortunately, all this stuff doesn't hold true for every level in the game, as there are two extra types of levels I have yet to discuss, yet they are very similar, the Octo Striker and Octoling levels. Both of these types of levels will have you go through a modified version of a multiplayer map, where your goal is to make it to the other side. For the former, an Octo Striker will continually be sending ink strikes at you that you'll have to dodge. Every time it fires at you, you have to move out of the way, and that's pretty much it. There's no more enemies along the way, but it's still just a linear trek through a multiplayer stage, and the tutorial map. It just feels like a lesser version of a normal level, with a predictable ink strike that you have to periodically avoid. For the Octoling levels, it's also on a multiplayer map, but your enemies for these levels are the Octolings, who are the equivalent to the Inklings, but instead of squids, they're octopuses. Essentially, the Octolings act as AI opponents, and it's very clear the whole purpose is to train you on how to fight other players in the multiplayer, but in the most basic way. The AI isn't the toughest, as they can be very unaware of their surroundings and get themselves stuck in your ink a lot. The only weapon they can use is an Octo Shot, which is the equivalent to a splatter shot, and that's it. They literally don't have any other types of weapons to fight you with, which means their way of teaching you multiplayer combat is very limited when you're always fighting the same playstyle. Throughout the levels, you'll pick up these armor cases that give you an extra shield of health, as you're just as fragile as you are in multiplayer, but on these levels, it feels like they give you more than you need, so you can really just power through most fights. These and the Octo Striker levels are definitely my least favorite part of the story mode, and these both always appear once per world, after the starting area. At least you can blaze through them pretty quickly once you've upgraded yourself. By collecting eggs, you can upgrade the different aspects of your character, from your fire rates, incapacity, and the power of your sub-weapons. There are 3 different sub-weapons from the multiplayer that you can use. The Splat Bomb unlocked by default, but you also get the Burst Bombs and Seekers, and you can switch between them by using the D-pad. I personally focus on upgrading my fire rates, because with just one upgrade, this thing inks like crazy and demolishes enemies in an instant. Upgrading yourself is a good incentive to explore the nooks and crannies and levels, but the main reason you'll be doing that is for the sunken scrolls inside these small orange boxes. There's one in each level, and your main collectibles to look out for. They're just the right amount of secret if you ask me. They're not insanely complex to find, but you still gotta keep an eye out for any spots of the levels that look like there's more to them. I'm pretty sure I only had to replay a level due to missing a sunken scroll like once, so getting all of them shouldn't be much of a hassle. For each scroll, you're given a page that goes over some aspect of the lore. Splatoon as a series is actually rich in its world building, and the scrolls from the first game set up a lot of the base knowledge of the world and its history. It's here where it's established that Splatoon actually takes place in a post-apocalyptic planet Earth, where the world was flooded, killing all humans until the sea creatures evolved to live on land. Due to the limited land caused by the rising sea levels, the Great Turf War was fought between the Octarians and the Inklings, with the Inklings winning by the end. This led to the Octarians being forced to live deep underground in caves, like the levels we go through in the game. Yeah, all these bright and open areas are actually all underground domes, to make it look like they're in a freer space, which is both fascinating and kinda depressing to think about. The environmental levels are honestly really good when you take a moment to appreciate it all. They've been running out of power, however, which is the reason they sold the Great Zapfish in the first place. There's honestly a lot of reasons to sympathize with the Octarians. Allowing them to live more peaceful lives with the Inklings eventually becomes an aspect of the series. For now though, no, they bad, kill them, whatever, who cares about morals? Besides all that history junk, there's a good amount of coverage over the culture of Inkopolis. My favorite sunken scroll though, is the one focused on the origin of Judd, the cat that determines who wins a match in the multiplayer. He was owned by a scientist who, before their death, put a drug in Judd to make them immortal, and then placed him in a cryogenic chamber so that he'd survive and live beyond the end of humanity. And just like that, Judd became the only mammal on Earth. It's such a sad little detail, but one that makes the world of Splatoon feel more alive, and sunken scrolls in general were one of my favorite parts of the story mode. It was always a treat seeing what bit of lore would be covered in the one I just got. Now as for the story that actually unfolds in the mode itself, yeah, there really isn't much. Captain Cuttlefish will talk to you during levels, but it's kinda hard to pay attention to. You can talk to him in the overworld where he has a bunch of random lines of dialogue, but he'll actually have stuff to say between each world. After the third world though, he gets kidnapped by the main bad, and now we have Agents 1 and 2 to help us through the levels. By these last two worlds however, they kinda run into a problem, and it's that we ran out of unique mechanics, so a lot of the levels are basically just more challenging versions of the previous levels. I was evading flooders through a maze in this level, and here I am doing it again, only with a larger map. It doesn't help that there's also still the Octo Striker and Octoling levels to go through as well, so by the last area, there's very little new to what levels will throw at you. In a way, you can see it as the game testing you on the obstacles you've gotten used to, but these levels aren't that much harder. Another thing I noticed too when playing the Charger levels was how numerous levels would end with a small arena where you'd fight a few Octolings, but they'd give you a special to totally destroy them. I stuck with the Charger though, so this took a while. You can play with the Charger in the single player by using the Inkling Girl amiibo, along with the Ruler if you have the Inkling Boy amiibo. You only have 3 levels per area, and the boss, so it's not exactly a way to replay the whole game with a different weapon. You get a few rewards for doing these challenges like some equipment, and a gamepad game that I can't show off because how does anyone record a gamepad in the year 2022? My lord! I only have the Inkling Girl amiibo though, so I can't show off how the Roller or the challenges featuring the Squid amiibo work. For the little squiddy thing, instead of a weapon, you can go through levels as the Kraken special, or play levels with limited ink. And that one specifically is the most interesting to me, but my only reference is Chugga's LP. No! It's really annoying to me how all of this is locked behind amiibo, one of those times where the amiibo feels like a fancy way to have paid DLC, instead of being a neat figure to have with some neat bonuses. I only mentioned the first boss, but to continue from there, the Octonozzle is next. It's a tower boss where you gotta move around and destroy its weak points. Not particularly hard or that interesting, just make sure you jump over its balls. But a rather disturbing aspect of boss levels is that after you defeat them, if you stand around for a bit, you'll start hearing these really unsettling background noises, like the apocalypse is happening with screams and crashing occurring. People have interpreted this in many ways, but a popular one is that Octarian society is falling apart and going into chaos as you've been stealing their sources of electricity. What's even stranger is that not even the director of Splatoon supposedly knew about these sounds, and that by itself makes this a lot creepier. I'm sure this scared a number of 12-year-olds when they found out about this, and I might have been one of them. Third boss, the Octo Whirl. This fight is legitimately fantastic. It attacks you by rolling at you, but to get it vulnerable, you have to ink enough turf so that the boss will get stuck in it, leaving it open to attack. Throughout the phases, the floor will start spinning and some areas will become uninkable, and it's overall really smartly designed. Boss 4 is the Octomaw, and this one's pretty good too. You gotta shoot away his teeth so that you can throw a bomb inside it. The attacks are flashy and the design is fun. Not much else to say. Before getting to the final boss, I want to briefly bring up the music because I am an unapologetic lover of Splatoon music and I don't care what anyone says. I love this game's OST. The abstract and weird vocals are easy to make fun of, and people have definitely made fun of them, but I can't help but find it fun to listen to. Octo Valley has its own sound to it, since it's mostly songs from the in-universe band Turquoise October. My favorite songs from them in the game are 8-Legged Advance and Tentacular Circus. I think I said that right. I would defend these songs like my life depends on it. Shuffle Parade and Tornado Shuffle are kinda bland songs, I'll admit that, and there's not that many themes for stages, so you'll end up hearing the same ones a lot, but god damn it, Splatoon music is awesome, y'all are just boring. The final boss is located all the way in this UFO that you're free to jump off of, and you can actually end up landing on an earlier area, which I like to do. Entering, Captain Cuttlefish is all tied up, and awaiting us is the Great Zapfish, being held by the true big bad of the story, and the leader of the Octarians, DJ Octavio, a DJ Octopus. I love this guy. This fight is pretty different from all the rest. DJ Octavio will be firing an onslaught of projectiles at you, but when he launches his fists, you gotta shoot them back at him to push him back, in order to progress through the stage. Yeah, this fight isn't a set arena like all the other fights. Your surroundings continue to change the further you get into the fight, utilizing mechanics you're familiar with from the levels. Once you reach the end of a section, Octavio will launch a giant missile that you both have to play tennis with, until it goes BLAM in his face! A launch pad appears, and it's off to another part of the map to duke it out. It's a really long fight that keeps you on your squid feet, since he adds moves like his own killer whale. The rate of specials and armors that appear feel like a fair amount to keep you going without making you too overpowered. The atmosphere here is off the charts, as Octavius is owning it with his theme, but once you reach the final stretch of the fight, a new song plays that's been alluded to previously, Calamari Incantation by the Squid Sisters. This frees Captain Cuttlefish and 100% confirms that Agents 1 and 2 are actually the Squid Sisters, and Cuttlefish is their grandpa. It's a plot twist that's incredibly obvious to anyone over the age of like 12, but as someone who was 12 when I played this game, oh my god, this is the fight, it clicked in my head, oh my god, cool! Going through the final phase of this fight with Calamari Incantation backing it for the first time is still one of the most hype moments I've ever had with a final boss. It's been a simple journey getting here, but this whole sequence makes it all feel like something special, and god damn it, it's just cool as hell. The fight gets legitimately challenging, but the song gives you this unstoppable confidence to kick its ass and deliver that final blow. There's definitely some nostalgia at play, but this is still one of my favorite final bosses in any video game. It never fails to energize me. Once DJ Octavio is defeated, we're taken back to the title screen, where a news broadcast is occurring. The Great Zapfish has returned thanks to the heroic efforts of Agent 3. Octavio is being kept in this little snow globe, peace has been restored to Angopolis, we still have 2 more story modes to cover. And to wrap it all up is the credits, that you get to paint in yourself as it scrolls. All the really cute illustrations are shown off, and like the game itself, these credits are full of personality. The best part of the credits though, is the song that's playing, another Squid Sisters song, Maritime Memory. It's one of my all-time favorite songs from Splatoon as a whole, even when I first listened to it. There's this nostalgic feeling to the song. It makes it feel like Splatoon was a long-time franchise when the game came out, and not a budding series that grew to be a top Nintendo IP. To me, the story mode of Splatoon 1 feels like it's where it all began. Not only does Splatoon work as a fun multiplayer shooter, but it also has so much potential as a single-player platformer action game. This first story mode may have not tapped into all that potential, since ultimately, it's a supplementary mode to teach new players how to play multiplayer, like I've already said before, but it can't be denied how much creativity and care was put into this campaign. I still had a great time revisiting this mode. The story mode of Splatoon 1 remains an important part of what made that game what it is to me. But that leads us to one specific question. Does the same hold true for Splatoon 2's story mode? See you guys until then. When Splatoon 1 came out, one of its most notable inclusions was the single-player campaign. Despite being a multiplayer shooter, the game also featured a full story mode that was structured like a 3D platformer, with many bits of lore to make the world feel alive like no other Nintendo game. While it was pretty easy and partly served as prep for the multiplayer, a lot of the level design had its own flair, with bosses and a finale that made this part of Splatoon feel like something special. It's just not the kind of thing you're likely to replay once you've completed it, since if you're going back to Splatoon, it's for the multiplayer. As the Switch was coming around to get Nintendo out of Wii U hell, one of the first games revealed for the system was the sequel to the original Splatoon. By this point, the game had not even been out for 2 years, but they were already moving forward with a new game. Probably to make all us Splatoon fans migrate to the Switch sooner rather than later. And while the game had issues of minimal content at launch, just like its predecessor, nowadays, Splatoon 2 is a pretty meaty game that I've gotten a lot more out of compared to 1. Something that was at least always part of the game at launch was the new story mode, since the first game kinda set this obligation to have one each game. We got our first look at it from a trailer before the game's release. From what we saw, it seemed a lot like how the first game's single player worked, but instead of Captain Cuttlefish, Marie of the Squid Sisters was the character to guide us. An interesting change, and one that may or may not have been influenced by the results of Splatoon 1's final Splatfest. Cats were robbed and I'll stand by this forever! The game came out, and after nearly 5 years, yeah, I don't hear anyone talk about this campaign anymore. If anyone's talking about a story mode of Splatoon 2, they're going to be talking about a certain DLC, but we'll get there when we get there. Like one story mode, I played it once at launch and then never touched it again, so this will be my first time playing it since. For how I'm going to approach this, I want to see how they improved upon the first game, and if they've at all expanded upon what a Splatoon story mode can really be. The Splatoon hype is still running through my veins as we wait for Splatoon 3, let's dive right in. Okay, since you still only have one save per profile, I booted up another one I got, and began the character creator process again. I'm an Octoling girl in my normal save, but here, I'm an Inkling girl with short hair soon to essentially become a child soldier. Got our basic tutorial again, but instead of Angopolis Plaza, we're in Angopolis Square, with a new support from Off the Hook, better than the Squid Sisters. The Great Zapfish, which is the source of power for Angopolis, has mysteriously vanished, but more importantly, Callie of the Squid Sisters has also gone missing. Surely we gotta put together some sort of search party to learn about her whereabouts. Nah, Pearl's right, they'll come back eventually. Oh, and there's this little bit about Pearl pointing out how all these Inklings are rocking these new hairstyles. Another time. If we want to do something about the missing Zapfish and Callie, all we gotta do is go down this manhole. Entering takes us to Octo Canyon, with Marie waiting for us there. She introduces herself to us as being the pop sensation from the Squid Sisters, but we have no idea who she is. A meta reason for this could be how many newcomers are entering the series with 2 because who wonder we you, but the in-universe reason is that our character was too busy with extracurricular activities to watch TV and media on the Squid Sisters. As the second agent of the Squidbeak Splatoon, Marie explains to us how the Altarians are the ones who've stolen the Great Zapfish and asks for our help in recovering it. Just like before, our silence translates as a yes to this dangerous mission. And thus, we have become Agent 4, another silent protagonist that we have very little to grasp on. Taking out the character chart for 2, Agent 4 is described as down for whatever, which you can take however you want, really. I mean, at the end of the day, they're all make your own headcanons and interpretations kind of characters. If y'all got any fun ones, let me know in the comments, I'm kind of curious. Okay, so I only found out about this a month or two ago from Chugga's current Let's Play, but on the Splatoon 2 website, there's a page called The Squid Sisters Stories, a few chapters focusing on Callie and Marie's relationship after the final Splatfest of Splatoon 1. Pretty much going into how their careers began to take off in different directions, leading to the two cousins, oh yeah, they're not sisters but cousins, I forgot to mention that in the last video, spending way less time together and drifting apart as a result. I wouldn't necessarily call it a must-read, as you can already infer a lot of the info given in these stories, and the last few chapters are merely set up for Callie's disappearance, and Marie going to Angopolis Square. Still a neat read for any Splatoon fan, so I'll leave a link to it in the description below. So our adventure begins anew with the exact same structure. Go through a linear stage and collect the mini Zapfish located at the end. Once you have all of them, there's a boss, and then off to the next area. A little thing about the hub world I didn't mention in the first video is that Octo Valley was all this massive area that you can easily move around to access all the levels. In Splatoon 2, every world is divided into separate areas that have load screens. While I miss how the hub world was a singular location in the first game, I do think this format is much better. Each area is much larger and unique with their environments, and the time of day also progresses the further you get into the game, which is good visual progression. As for the levels themselves, yeah, you already know the drill. Defeat enemies, platform through obstacles, find some hidden collectibles, destroy boxes to collect eggs, use the eggs to upgrade yourself, mini Zapfish to kidnap, that's all here again. Starting out, your hero shot is much weaker than it was in 1. Like, just look at that fire rate difference. It doesn't make the starting gameplay a slog, but you will have to play a bit carefully before upgrading it. Luckily, you don't just have the hero shot this time, as thanks to Sheldon, we have 9 weapons at our disposal. For most stages, you'll be assigned a weapon to use, and the level design will be based around getting the most out of it. This by itself adds so much more variety than the first game's campaign. You're not just getting used to the basic splatter shot, but most of the other types of weapons you can use in multiplayer. It also goes a long way in making more creative stages. Okay, so remember how I praised the level design of 1? Well, 2's levels blow that game's out the water because god damn the levels in this game are fantastic. First off, the environments are even more whimsical than before. We're still traversing through domes with floating platforms all around, but we've got a great number of unique settings like this bright and sunny sea area, or this space-like area with train tracks and teacups floating around. It's not the most different, but they worked with what they got. Now when it comes to level mechanics, oh my god, they added so many phenomenal mechanics to make these levels a blast to go through. You got all the things from 1 back, like invisible terrain, the sponges, flutters, all that junk, but by level 3, we get introduced to these dash tracks which launch you the second you touch them. A simple but fun new addition. Rule 2 though, we got Rollonium. These tubes that go flying in the direction you hit them and wreck enemies. This is paired with the roller to really make it feel like you're smacking a string to an enemy's face, and it feels really satisfying. But who cares about that when you got grind rails, one of the best additions to Splatoon's gameplay. They work like grind rails on something like Sonic, where you can jump between adjacent rails, but the game feel here is so good. Something about the way you jump between and off rails has this really nice flow to it. Seeing as this is Splatoon, however, you're able to turn into a squid to avoid obstacles, or aim and shoot while grinding on rails. The odds about balloons and such free to shoot, and it's such a thrill to shoot while grinding. They introduced us in a level with frickin' dualies too. So this level is just non-stop movement with action after action being chained together. One of my favorite levels in the game right here. To dial it back down a bit, we now have big squeegees, because apparently the most annoying obstacle in one needed an older brother. While it's a tad clunky to deal with, I can't deny that it is pretty fun to ride and run over any unfortunate sap that's nearby. The bounce pads are a simple addition, but it's another fun mechanic for platforming, and Squid go jump. Ink furlers, those are pretty neat as well. When you shoot them, they unravel into platforms, but any shot from an enemy can roll them back up, so that's something to watch out for. Grapple links though, another banger mechanic right here. Shooting them makes you zip straight into their location, making for another fun method of movement. The introduce an idea and then evolve it as the level goes on mentality is still here for 2, but levels are able to blend a lot more elements together into one. The first game limited a level to usually being based around only one unique mechanic, but 2 is a lot more willing to mix and match ideas if it makes for a more interesting stage. Like, we got the invisible terrain back, but throughout the level, let's also put some ink rows right here, dash tracks over there, and then at the end of the level, let's end it with giant squeegees that you ride on with long-range enemies hanging around. Both the gimmicks and weapons you're assigned end up giving each level their own unique identity. There were a number of times throughout my playthrough where I went, oh yeah, this stage! I may suck at sniping, but I loved this level where you have to use a splatter shot against all these other octo snipers in this really explorable area. Even if you don't like a certain weapon you're assigned, it's hard to deny how well designed these levels are with those weapons. We got a few new enemies occasionally thrown into levels. You got these Octarians inside bowling balls rolling around some levels, and you gotta find the best means of maneuvering around them. This guy's commanding this giant flying octo stomper that you're able to get on top of. There are these funny little guys that shit out bombs and run away from and run away from you while usually containing a key. You have to think a bit about how you're gonna cut off its path and catch it. Some regular enemies even get upgrades later on in the game. The Octo Troopers get these thrusters to dodge left and right from your shots, making them bastards to fight at points. Other than some new gimmick enemies and a few upgrades, you'll still be mostly finding the same enemy types throughout the game as you did in the first. Not a big deal since multiple weapons doesn't make every encounter the same, but if a wide new selection of enemies was what you were looking for in this game, I'm sorry to say, but I already said the disappointing news earlier in this paragraph. At least they ended up improving the 2 levels I disliked most from the first game, the Octo Striker and the Octoling levels. For the former, the Octo Striker levels are so much better in this game, because they don't exist. Okay, but seriously, props to how they improved the Octoling levels in this game. There's still 1 per area after the beginning, but they made a number of changes that went a long way. You're back on multiplayer maps, but instead of simply making it to the enemy side, you have to collect these mini zap fishies scattered all around, and the levels end when you collect the final one. This means that you actually have to explore the whole map instead of a linear trek to the end. There's a lot more changes to the levels as well. Sprinklers can be placed around, and occasionally, enemies like Octo Snipers will act as extra obstacles to avoid when going through the map. The Octolinks finally have more than just the basic Octo Shot. Yeah, they now have weapons like rollers, blasters, sloshers, actual variety. They're still not that hard to fight, since you've got the armor system on your side, but it's not the exact same song and dance every time we fight them now. I think it's a good time to bring up how they've reworked your health system. There's still the armor cases you can pick up to stack more defense on yourself, but it didn't notice quite as many throughout my playthrough. Instead, the hero suit acts as a sort of armor from the get-go. When Agent 4 takes too much damage, you'll lose the hero suit and enter a critical state. During this, your speed is dramatically reduced, and any good hit is down enough to kill you. You'll recover the hero suit after a little bit of time, or by doing actions like reaching a checkpoint, or picking up another armor case. It's an interesting change to how health works, that I end up really liking. The Octoling levels are still the weakest levels in the game, but I find them a lot more interesting to play through than before. I at least have to actually explore the map to find the Sunken Scroll this time. Yeah, Sunken Scrolls have returned, with 27 new pages of lore to sink your teeth into. While the Splatoon 1 Sunken Scrolls had a major focus on the history of Splatoon, you know, all that destruction of humanity and great turf war junk, 2's focuses more on how the world itself has changed between both games, and more general bits of world building. There's also these scrolls you can get in the overworld that give you stickers. I mean, that's cool. We get a number of scrolls based on Salmon Run to give more context for that mode, but we also learn how Spike made a fortune off his business in Splatoon 1, the regulations made to the special weapons, giving an handler a reason why those specials are no longer here, some program feature Marie solo, you get the idea. I like the one on the social media post by Teen Inklings, showing off more of the life of Inklings outside of battling. Two sunken scrolls that have stuck in my brain are the ones giving some origins on each member of Off the Hook. There's a cute little picture of Pearl as a kid, apparently damaging a venue with her vocals, good lord. Marina's scroll reveals that she was actually there in the audience during the final fight of Splatoon 1 as part of the Arcturian force, which is really interesting. I wonder if there's any part of this game that elaborates on that fact. Of course, we got some more Judd lore, specifically on Lil Judd, the new Judge-a-2 that represents the opposing team. Judd may have been the only mammal to survive the end of humanity thanks to his owner, but knowing that he would be lonely in this new world, reactivating the capsule would give life to a clone of Judd, and that's how Little Judd came to be. The wildest thing to come from this, in all honesty, is that in the character Charter 2, Lil Judd's feelings towards Judd is, I've known from the moment of my birth that I'm just a replica of you. How could you ever understand my feelings? And that's just, oh my god, this cute little guy's going through an existential crisis. Maybe all that stress is the reason his fur is all messy in 3. The Sunken Scrolls in general are still a treat to read and act as another interesting dive into Splatoon's lore, but I think this should be the last game we really have them. 1 and 2 have gotten enough use from them, and I believe we should have another form of character and world building as part of the story mode in 3. In this game though, finding the Sunken Scrolls is way harder than the first game. Okay, so you know how I said in the Splatoon 1 video that I didn't have much issue finding the Sunken Scrolls and only missed like 1? Several times in my playthrough, I ended up missing it and had to replay the level as a result. Not every single scroll is incredibly tricky, but for a good number of them, you really have to be aware of your surroundings and look at any areas you may normally look past. Like, I completely missed the grapplings in this area during my first run, but lo and behold, getting on top of these flutters led me to a scroll. You can also find the Sardinian hidden in each level and in each overworld. They're much easier to collect than the scrolls, but in terms of what they do, they just act as an extra currency you have to upgrade your weapons, fire rate, incapacity, and sub-weapons. The Splat Bombs return, but instead of the Burst Bombs and Seekers, we got the Auto Bombs and Curling Bombs. I would have preferred the Burst Bombs instead of the Auto Bombs if I'm being honest, but the Curling Bombs are an excellent way to go across enemy ink. You can upgrade your other weapons besides the Hero Shot, but I never had the spare eggs to do so. Upgrading yourself is way more expensive than the first game, and I'm not entirely sure how I feel about it. I like it at the start because it really makes you feel like you have to work to improve yourself, but by the end, you'll probably only max out your firing rate. If you want to fully max out your character, that'll take some grinding to do. If there's any pro to this, is that it further incentivizes the player to explore every nook and cranny in levels, not only for the scroll and Sardinian, but more eggs. In Splatoon 1, I kinda just found the scroll and then made a straight shot to the goal. You can also end up getting enough eggs while you're playing levels with different weapons, as there is an incentive for this. By playing through every kettle with a specific weapon, you can unlock it as part of the multiplayer. As far as completion goes, you should only do this if you really want to, as you're just gonna be replaying the same levels over and over, using weapons that clearly weren't designed with them in mind. It's not exactly a goal that interests me, I'm just content with getting all the scrolls, but I do find it an interesting challenge during bosses. Well, I've gone this far without mentioning the bosses, and compared to 1, they're a good improvement. I like these bosses a lot more than the first game, not only because their attack patterns are more complex and unique between fights, but they play around with specific weapons you're given. The second boss is red as hell for how it's a one-on-one roller fight, and the fourth boss is one of my favorites for how it's a creative test of your sniping skills, with a completely distinct arena designed with the fight in mind. The Octo Stomper does end up returning as the third area boss, but they have fun revamping the fight. The titles crack me up too. These fights aren't really much harder than the first game's bosses, but they're still fun against the areas. After the end of each area, you're given a small conversation with Marie, similarly to Cuttlefish in the first game. Marie gives commentary and advice throughout the stages too, but I still end up hardly noticing them in the midst of levels, unless it's her nagging me for going after every collectible. If you're watching someone else play the game, it's way easier to read any noble dialogue, or if you can see you're talking to her in the overworld. Besides Marie, Sheldon also joins in on chats, seeing as how he's the only one supplying your weapons. Really, the only trait you need to know about Sheldon is said from Agent 4. This guy can talk! The game unfortunately stays too true to one story, meaning there's very little to begin with still. A lot of the dialogue between areas isn't all that deep. We learned that Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3 are somewhere else during this adventure that I wouldn't know anything else about. Nope, why would I know anything about that? And that Marie's goal here beyond finding the Grey Zapfish is finding Callie, which is something even Agent 4 knew before she told us. It gets slowly revealed during the story that Callie is on the Arcturian side, which is another easily predictable thing. But at least it's fully revealed in a pretty funny way. Like, regardless of how bare this story is, the charm of Splatoon's writing still shines through. Marie was my personal favorite Squish sister, so the idea of her being my guide was inherently awesome, and having the results of 1's final Splatfest have an influence on 2's story is pretty novel, but again, still nothing too deep. If you're hoping for a brand new narrative to really sink your teeth into, I'm sorry, but that's really not what's here. It's a revamped version of 1's story that puts more focus on the Squid Sisters. What this game does do way better than 1 is the final world. I said in the previous video that I felt the level concepts were starting to run dry by the final world, but that's the complete opposite here. These are honestly some of the best levels of the story. They're still kind of harder versions of previous mechanics, but executed in a far more interesting way. This new grind rail level kicks so much ass. That sense of flow is further enhanced with all these later mechanics that have been introduced, and it's just, it's fun. The level design just remains consistently great all throughout. A cool detail about a lot of the stage music that I forgot to mention is that a lot of them have Callie's vocals in them, which is a nice touch. I was an avid lover of Octo Valley songs since Splatoon 1, and I love the songs in Octo Canyon even more. Callie's vocals are one thing, but as songs, they're a lot of fun to listen to. We get some returning themes from 1 like Tentacular Circus, the ultimate Splatoon fan with the Ox moment. Boss seems to do a much better job of pumping me up as well. I couldn't find any creepy sounds in the back this time though, so no more creepypastas for us I guess. But forget all about that, we finally made it to the final boss. Awaiting us in the final area is Callie, rocking a, oh wow, badass outfit, with the returning GJ Octavio, using the power of the Great Zapfish. Again, he brainwashed Callie into joining his side, and now they're about to drop a beatdown on us. Octavio fights incredibly similarly to his first fight. You avoid his attacks, and then shoot back the fist he launches at you. He'll add new types of attacks as the fight goes on, like a dash attack, and fists you can't shoot back, but unlike 1, you're in a fixed circular arena the whole fight, which is kinda lame in comparison. This fight is much shorter too, so it ends up feeling like a lesser version of 1's fight. What is better than 1 though is the music for the first phase. We got a remix of Callie's solo song, Bomb Rush Blush, and it slaps so hard! The way they turned this song into an epic final boss theme that incorporates bits of Octavio's theme is wild. It's hard going back to the original song without thinking of this rendition. I think this song is definitely much better than Octavio's theme in 1. The stakes just feel more escalated as you're listening to this. And then by the second phase, Marie snipes the hypno glasses off of Callie, initiating the next final boss theme, Title Rush, which is a remix of Marie's solo song, Tide Goes Out. And then it blends in with Bomb Rush Blush as both squids are singing their hearts out, and I don't have any fancy or unique way of saying how cool and hype this part is. It just is. But what's even more awesome is the final phase. Callie finally remembers who she is, she's back in her familiar outfit along with Marie, the Squid Sisters are back, debuting their new version of Calamari Incantation. Spicy Calamari Incantation. I still prefer the original song, but this one has grown on me a lot. The whole last part of this fight is on grind rails, with our last weapon provided by Sheldon, the Rainmaker. It's an easy back and forth of firing Rainmaker shots at Octavio's fists and dodging the spiral shots, but the atmosphere is off the charts just like before. The audience all around you, the Squid Sisters on the giant screens, Octavio getting aggravated on his second defeat at the hands of the Squid Sisters. The final push is more of a victory lap unlike 1's final push, but it's one hell of a victory lap that while being extremely similar to the first game, as a lot of parts of this game, it still remains a great note to end the story mode on. Especially how the final hit is stamping the Rainmaker right onto Octavio's face. Octavio explodes for the second time, or well, third time if you count the potential rematch of 1, and we cut back to the title screen for another news broadcast from Off the Hook. The Great Zapfish has once again returned to Inkopolis, but also Callie has been found. To celebrate the great news, a new track is played live. The new hit single from the Squid Sisters, Fresh Start, thus taking us to the credits. I prefer Maritime Memory, but Fresh Start is another track that's grown on me a lot, to the point that I really love it. It combines both of Callie and Marie's solo songs into one, highlighting how they work best as a team. If we go back to Octo Canyon, both Marie and Callie will be there as well as Octavio, back in his little globe. Callie can give you a few records on your recent multiplayer matches, as well as some more fun dialogue between the two sisters. Or cousins. Crap, but they got me again. I forgot to mention this about the first game, but rematching the final boss has unique dialogue to justify why you're doing it again, and it's a pretty cute way of replaying the finale. The same holds true for 2, with the context that Callie put on the Hypno Shades again, because she thought she looked good in them. Well, fair enough. And now, that pretty much wraps up the story mode of Splatoon 2. Do I think this is the better story mode than Splatoon 1? Yeah. The levels are way more interesting and fun to go through, having access to multiple weapons adds needed variety, the bosses are a step up, the new music is good, the dialogue remains as charming as ever. As an overall package, it's an improved version of 1's campaign, but unfortunately, it's not much more than that. The story mode of Splatoon 2 improves on 1, but it doesn't evolve what a story mode in a game like Splatoon can be. It's kinda like Super Mario Galaxy 2 for me. I love that game more than the first because of the improved level design and mechanics, but its identity is inherently tied to its predecessor in more ways than would be liked. I get why this story mode has the same structure and nearly the same plot as 1. Splatoon 2 was a lot of people's first Splatoon game because, once a Wii U, so giving newcomers a better version of the story mode they never got to play makes a degree of sense. It's just that for those of us that played and loved Splatoon 1, we've done a similar song and dance before. Even if it's much better, we're not gonna be really wowed by it at all. Again, I still really enjoyed my time replaying this story mode, and I wouldn't mind playing it again sometime in the future, but it really missed the mark on bringing single player Splatoon to the next level. If you were hoping for a radically different and unique single player mode for Splatoon 2 that told a completely new story, you weren't gonna find that here. But if you waited for about a year, you'd get exactly what you wanted. Next time on the Splatoon journey, it's Octolink's time to shine. We've talked about Splatoon 1 story mode, we've talked about the initial campaign for Splatoon 2, now for the big one. The Nintendo Direct that happened in March of 2018 was pretty good if I do say so myself. Nowadays, the biggest reveal people took away from it was the announcement of a new Smash game, but the info right before that was no slouch either. Splatoon 2 got its 3.0 announcement, new gears, new maps, all that kind of junk. Rank X also got added to the game, and if I still haven't reached it by the time this video comes out, then I've probably given up altogether. The real thing to make Splatoon fans go nuts was the trailer they transitioned to right after. It wasn't immediately clear what the heck was going on, but one thing was for sure from the opening scene: Octolinks were finally playable. The feature that's been wanted since the first Splatoon was finally here, and with it, a new story mode. Watching it today, this trailer still kicks so much ass. It gives off this mysterious vibe, while still supplying enough info to keep us intrigued. All we knew was that this was a new single player story, and Marina and Pearl were somehow involved, along with the returning Captain Cuttlefish and Agent 3. Once you finished it, you get to play as Octolinks in the multiplayer, but before all that, it all starts here, in Splatoon 2, Octo Expansion. It would be the first paid DLC for Splatoon 2, but it ended up being the only paid DLC for the game, so whoops. This may be a bit of a twist, but the first time I played Octo Expansion was actually the beginning of this year. For a while, I kinda fell out of Splatoon. I spent a good amount of time on 2, but was somewhat burnt out because I already played a lot of the first game. The big resurgence into my Splatoon obsession was Chuckaconroy's Let's Play of the game. I figured there was no better time to jump back into Splatoon to hype myself up for 3. Once I finished Octo Expansion, the obsession kicked in all over again, and my playtime with 2 skyrocketed this year like you wouldn't believe. There's still some time left before Splatoon 3's release. Let's go ahead and knock out the final story mode we have left to cover. Pale summer moonlight shimmers on the sea floor. An octopus, unaware that dawn will bring capture, rests within a trap, dreaming fleeting dreams. That is the opening text, as we open our eyes to Captain Cuttlefish, being right at our face as we're on the ground. According to him, we were in the middle of a fight with Agent 3 in Octo Valley before getting interrupted by a mysterious third party, and next thing you know, us and Cuttlefish have been stranded in this unknown place. Calling a truce with the old squid, he introduces himself before asking who we are. Turns out, we've lost all our memories, leaving us a blank slate, transitioning us to the character creator. You can choose between a boy and a girl, but unlike the Inklings, you only have 2 hairstyles per gender, which is kind of lame. Not the biggest fan of the boys options either. I like the afro, but it doesn't exactly have any Octolink features added to it. Some little tentacle bumps would have been nice. Visually, what differentiates the Octolinks from the Inklings is that their eye masks don't connect and have a different shape, as well as having rounded ears, and the standard tentacle count for their hair is 4 instead of 6, making 8 limbs in total for obvious reasons. I will say, the standard hair for the Octolink girl is honestly perfect. It's not ginormous like hair on the enemy designs, and it's got a great blend of looking like conventional hair while having an octopus shape. I picked the girl Octoling, and now here I am. Cuttlefish says that we were humming Calamari Incantation before I woke up, a song that apparently had a massive cultural effect on the Octolinks that heard it during the final battle of Splatoon 1. With this realization, Cuttlefish accepts us as a fellow friend, dispelling any beef we might have had as potentially an Octolink soldier. Exploring the area, we appear to be in an abandoned subway station. Following a trail of ink through the tunnels, a panel on the floor supplies us with a Splattershot Jr. to give us a brief refresh on the basics of Splatoon's gameplay. Venturing further, an old-fashioned telephone is ringing in this vast, empty area. Through the poorest attempt to sound hip with the kids, the phone welcomes us to the Deep Sea Central Station. His job is to guide us on our journey to reach what he calls the Promised Land, presumably being Gigapolis. We must first prove ourselves worthy to make it there. According to the phone, we are the 10,008th applicant in this strange trial, leading Cuttlefish to give us the name of Agent 8, as it lines up with the last number of their applicant name. This doesn't mean there's an Agent 5, 6, and 7, and no, Pearl and Marina are not considered agents. We're supplied with both a CQ-80 and a CQ card as a train arrives to pick us up. With no other real option, entering the train leads us to meeting its conductor, a little sea slug named Sea Cucumber. I just want to take a moment to appreciate this design. It's truly brilliant. The little guy explains that this facility is run by the Chemical Corporation. The Deep Sea Metro subway station connects together test chambers that applicants of the telephone's game must go through. Passing these tests will lead them to collecting the 4 Thangs, yes, that's how it's pronounced, and once all 4 of them are collected, the Promised Land will open its way to us. How Octo Expansion works is that instead of a couple hub areas that lead to linear levels, we're given these connected lines of stations. Before starting a station, you're dropped off at a platform where you decide what your weapon is. Instead of being assigned a single weapon most of the time in Octo Canyon, you're given up to 3 different weapons that the station will be designed around. Once you pick your weapon, you'll pay your CQ points, this game's currency, and then begin the station, earning more CQ points back once the mission is completed. In a clever way, choosing your weapon at the start sort of acts as a difficulty selector. The recommended weapon will more often than not give you the easiest time, while the weapon that rewards the most CQ points will be the hardest. I really like this way of creating your own difficulty, a lot more to it than a basic hard mode. Not that always picking the recommended weapon will make Octo Expansion easy because, well... Octo Expansion is hands down the hardest single player experience you will ever have with Splatoon, and it's not even a contest. The previous 2 campaigns kept in mind that this could be your first time playing Splatoon, so they were really never much of a challenge. Octo Expansion, however, assumes you're well experienced with the game at this point, and even then, it's still likely to push you to your limits at points. The first station is pretty simple. You get a splatter shot and you gotta make it to the end. The only enemies here are rival Octolings that look a bit different. Must have done something with their hair. This challenge is already harder than anything in Octo Canyon because the AI is way more aggressive than before. You're not gonna be able to fire recklessly until they die, and most importantly, they now also have access to specials. The final Octoling you fight here is equipped with dualies and an inkjet. Remember that one shot is enough to destroy your armor. Too bad I'm too much of a gamer and there were no match for me. Once at the end, all you gotta do is attack this pen and then touch it to mark its completion, earning ourselves a mem cake. we return back to the metro to do this about 79 more times. There are 80 missions because, haha, funny number 8. That's everywhere in this game, and if I pointed out every instance of this, my mouth would get drier than it already is. After finishing the first station, Cuttlefish's intercom begins picking up communication. Instead of Agent 3 on the other end, it's the superior idol duo, Pearl and Marina of Off the Hook. The two are on Mount Nantai as they discovered a radio connecting us to them. We tell them about our current predicament, and now we have contact with them for support. It always did feel kind of unfair to me how Pearl and Marina didn't get to be in the single player Splatoon 2, because the Squid Sisters were back again, with a story that wasn't very unique from before. Them finally becoming main characters in the campaign was really exciting for me as a result. Despite all I've said, this is where the journey really begins, as we can now reach the 4 things however we want, as you're immediately offered a split path for the stations, so now seems like a good time to start talking about a number of them. I'm tearing the bandage off right away, 8-ball missions. So you know stuff like the ball puzzle from 06? Yeah, this is the Splatoon version of that. You gotta navigate a giant 8-ball all the way to the end of a stage. You mainly move it by using your weapon. If the ball falls off the map at any moment, the bomb attached to your back kills you. Yeah, we're going full on death game here. These levels can be really stressful at first, but as long as you're not reckless and plan out your pushes with the ball, these can be pretty fun. It's not like the ball physics are hard to understand either, and they can get pretty creative with this one station that's basically just a game of billiards. There's a good number of stations like these that are just unique minigames, like, wait, this one is just Breakout, and this one is... I don't know what it's called, but I'm sure it's an existing game. Another portion of them are these quick challenges that'll have you do something like break all the targets or crates under the time limit. These are short bursts of challenge, and that pretty much describes a lot of the stages in Octo Expansion. Like this one, where you're weaponless and have to not get hit at all for 30 seconds. This felt impossible at first, but pro tip, stay towards the back. The bullets will either have disappeared by then, or bounce low enough that you can jump over them. Do not be swayed by the bonus eggs. They are the devil. There's another station similar to this, except you're using the inkjet. This special gets so much love in this campaign, as there's a number of missions where you use it for an unlimited time, through a whole obstacle course. I didn't think too much about this special in multiplayer, but it's so much more fun to use here. It's got this nice weight and momentum to it, and pressing jump will give you a burst upwards, leading to platforming way more inventive than most of what the previous campaigns offered. They use it to great effect with this rematch you have with the Octo Shower, completely changing how you approach this fight. It's a thrilling as heck encounter that keeps you moving. The other special that gets a similar love is the Baller. You're a giant hamster ball that has to race towards the end. The ball can explode as many times as it wants, but stage hazards can easily bump you off the stage. There's also a boss rematch with the Octo Samurai as the Baller. You can't take any damage, but his hits will send you flying! Going back to the target stages, the longer versions of them will usually put you on an automated platform and rails, and you have to make sure not to miss a single one on your path. For this playthrough, I decided to tackle this one station using the Bamboozler. I do not recommend this. This took countless attempts on my part. I am not a bamboo player. I am not a charger player. I want to try the bow and arrow in 3 releases, but right now, I am not the marksman this mission wanted me to be, but through sheer determination and my big brain, I did it. But while I'm being dramatic, this wasn't even the hardest mission for me to complete, where I tried the hardest weapon. No, that was this pain in my side. With the Dynamo Roller, I'm supposed to kill 3 waves of enemies, and starting out, it's not so bad. Even with the second wave, it's manageable enough if you get the jump on them. The third wave though, this stupid Gatling gun and the far off sniper with the splash walls in front of them, the Dynamo is way too slow for this. It often took me multiple hits to kill the first guy, and then swing after swing after swing to take down the sniper and his stupid walls. My mobility is shit, and it was a constant struggle that would inevitably lead to my death. And then I used a Stingray they give you, and it ended up being pretty simple. I kind of ruined my throat for nothing tonight. I need a drink of water, hold on. Besides this one moment, the Octo Snipers are actually a lot more fun to fight here. Previously, they were a basic obstacle that encouraged you to keep moving. Here, however, they'll put you in areas that'll leave you largely outnumbered, leading you to strategize how you'll take them out, one by one. You gotta remember that in Splatoon, you die fairly easily. Enemies can shred your armor and then easily pick you off in your critical state. Armor is rarer than it's ever been. I only have one clear memory of having fully stacked armor, and that was the first level. You're not going to be powering through enemies like the other campaigns, and that also goes for the rival Octolings. I've already touched on them briefly, but a couple of stations will have you dealing with them. You got this one linear stage based off the opening tutorial, but now modified to be much harder. They're also involved in the most infamous part of this whole game, but we'll save that for a bit later. Another time the Octolings are used are for these challenges where you basically have to play either Tower Control or Rainmaker, but you have no teammates. These missions were always subpar if you ask me. You're given more than enough time to complete the objective, and the Octolings don't put that great of a fight here. It's more annoying than anything to have to swim all the way back after a death in the Rainmaker stages. These are the only times the multiplayer maps are used in this campaign. It's taken me a while to actually talk about them, but a lot of stations are the linear levels you're familiar with from the other campaigns. In terms of the level design itself, it's a vast step up from the levels of 1 and 2, even with the improvements Octocanyon made. All the previous mechanics return, but they're used in a lot more interesting scenarios that make them a lot more difficult. You know, the creative kind of difficulty, and not the frustrating kind. Except this part I hate it. Remember all the praise I gave towards 2's levels in that video? And times that by 3 for these levels. There's not any collectibles in these levels besides eggs, so the optional secrets aren't as high as the previous story mode, but these are still easily the best designed levels Splatoon has had. There's no new bosses in any of these stations, however. I've already brought up a couple of the rematches using the specials, but you've still got some bosses that are simply harder versions. The Octo Stomper is back for a third time, and puts up more of a fight than ever before, now throwing bubbles into the mix. Kinda crazy how the first and easiest boss from Octo Expansion is now the hardest fight here. The Octo Oven is a bastard now. As the fight goes on, it'll start adding sprinklers, splash walls, and snipers all around it. And dang does this get overwhelming. It took me a while my first time, but getting those last hits is so satisfying. Alright, it's now later. Girl Power Station! By this point, you likely already did this pretty annoying turret station where you gotta protect this ball from all the projectiles coming at it. This station could be its own kind of worms, trust me, but once you figure out the arc of the missiles, it becomes manageable. Now for Girl Power Station, protect this orb once again, but now on foot where you get to pick any of these 9 weapons, as a bunch of Octolings will be coming at the ball to destroy it. Tower defense at its finest, and from what I've gathered, this is considered the most frustrating and most evil station in the whole game. I beat it on my first try when I first played this game. Yeah, I don't feel as resentful towards this mission as many others likely are, even after coming back to it for this video. I'm not gonna say that people simply need to get good, but it is a mission that you will likely need to learn. You're given a bunch of armor and special cases to use however you want, and all the Octolings come in a specific order at said locations, so reacting to them becomes easier once you know where they spawn, and which ones are a higher priority. Yes, the Octolings have a bunch of different specials that can end up shredding the orb if you let them get to it, and once you get overwhelmed, it can become basically impossible to win, but figuring out how to prevent this checkmate situation is what this station is all about. It can be very frustrating if you keep going in, expecting to win by merely fighting and reacting better. Figure out those new angles instead of bashing your head against the same strategies, and this station really won't be that bad. That mentality really is the cornerstone of a lot of Octo Expansion's difficulty. It can't be denied that there is a certain level of trial and error for a number of missions, but checkpoints are frequent, so you're almost always back to where you died in no time. I like to compare this difficulty to games like Celeste, where it's about thinking your way through scenarios, while also being extremely fragile. It's one of my favorite forms of challenge, so you can chalk that up to why I enjoy Octo Expansion so much. It's a very well-tuned difficulty for anyone who loves the gameplay of Splatoon. Most of the time. Regardless, there's no better feeling than finally passing a station that kicked your butt and getting that catchy as hell victory jingle. Every time you pass a station, you're rewarded with a mem cake. These are small figures that are modeled after characters and objects in the world Splatoon. Attached to them are these 3-line poems, focused on the objects and how our player character feels about them. It's not anything to the level of Suckin' Scrolls, but a number of them are nicely written, and it doesn't hurt to look through them every now and then. You're rewarded with new gear from multiplayer every time you complete a full set of mem cakes from my Padre, another passenger of the Deep Sea Metro. For as minor as his character is, I really enjoyed his presence, a giant isopod that was once a fellow test subject trying to reach the promised land like yourself, but gave up ages ago and has been losing a grasp on his memories since. In a way, sharing these mem cakes acts as a means of helping him maintain some semblance of memory, and I thought it was fascinating enough for what it is. There's no big hub areas like Octo Valley or Canyon for you to explore. Besides the empty central station, your main hub will be on the metro itself, and you only have access to 2 cars. It's a very claustrophobic environment compared to the previous 2 story modes, but I believe that was the point. The Deep Sea Metro is purposely not a comforting place. It's the Splatoon equivalent of the actual Deep Sea. It's where you'll find all these sea creatures with designs very different from anything you saw in Nicopolis. I like all of them as designs, but their strangeness further heightens how far away you are from the promised land that you yearn for, with the only glimmer of hope being this magazine that acts as a clever way of allowing you to exit the DLC. You can tell from the neon lights and colors that Octo Expansion is going for an 80s aesthetic for its presentation, and it's one that gives an identity to this campaign. The same could be argued for the music. Splatoon music is known for being kinda weird, but Octo Expansion is its own brand of strange. The level themes are all done by the in-universe musician, Deadfish, and not dueling with a really cool design from the artwork that's been shown. They don't actually appear in game, and despite being such a, quite frankly, non-existent character, they're pretty popular within the community, so hey, good for them. I know you probably hear a number of YouTubers say this, but as someone who's not an expert in criticizing music, a lot of it sounds very techno or vaporwave-esque. I don't really see myself going back to listen to a number of these tracks in a normal situation, but they're phenomenal at enhancing the strange and surreal feel of playing this game. The level track that makes an exception to what I said, and one that I go back to all the time, is the music for the 8-ball levels. It's got this lo-fi feel to it that's very relaxing, while still reminding you of the hopeless situation you've got yourself placed in, and all you can really do is keep moving forward. I've mentioned that you're rewarded with a mem cake from each station, but after completing a certain amount of missions, you'll receive chat logs between Pearl, Marina, and Captain Cuttlefish. They'll talk about a number of things related to your situation, but eventually, they'll get into having a lot more general discussions. This is where we get a lot of fleshing out for Off the Hook as a duo. We'll learn about their origins as a band, including Marina's backstory as part of the Octarian army, before abandoning it and meeting Pearl on Mount Nantai. They go into good detail about all the little parts of their story, and I found it really endearing. These chat logs were the personal highlight of this story for me. These are the most we've ever seen of character interactions and development between characters in this series yet. There have always been glimpses of this throughout, but they've always put forth world building and lore above everything else. Most of the dialogue in the previous story modes existed to primarily give exposition or be a progress check. Character dynamics and personalities felt pretty basic at the start. I know some may bring up the Squid Sister stories, but besides not even being in the game itself, a lot of it was simply narration over a string of events, with very little scenes getting fleshed out really, if you get what I mean. Octo Expansion has given us the best chance for these characters to simply talk to each other and understand their relationships. Of course, when I say characters, I obviously mean Pearl and Marina, because you can tell Cuttlefish gets pushed to the side at a certain point. These two are hands down my favorite characters in Splatoon. These chat logs really highlight the inseparable bond these two have. Even with Pearl learning about Marina's past as an Octoling, it doesn't change a thing about how she feels about her. They're a pairing that I found stood out a lot more compared to the Squid Sisters. Of course, those two work as the iconic first duo to get you familiar with the concepts of idols in Splatoon, but after that first establishment, they were able to do something a lot more unique and interesting with Off the Hook in my opinion. There's a reason the final Splatfest 2 wasn't Pearl versus Marina. With all we know about their relationship, it simply wouldn't make any sense. All of this makes the final results, where it's declared that Off the Hook will be sticking together forever, all the more touching. It's no wonder so many people ship these two together. Hell, it can be argued Nintendo does as well in certain cases. I really hope Splatoon 3 adds some sort of equivalent of this with its story mode. We already know Sunken Scrolls are returning, but I think that these chat logs have set a new standard for character interactions that should be followed up on. The only other part of these chats that I want to note is learning that other Octolinks have been arriving in Ingopolis and have been participating in turf wars. To me, this works in both a literal and meta way. It tells you how other Octolinks like yourself have been making it to Ingopolis and have becoming part of its society, but also that others have been finishing Octo expansion and been unlocking Octolinks as characters. It's kinda cute in that way. Once you've collected the 4 things, which by the way aren't actual challenges, it's just going through a hallway and grabbing the piece, which is kind of underwhelming. But anyway, the telephone puts them all together in order to form a blender. They say to go inside to be taken to the promised land, but if it wasn't obvious already, this is all a trap in order to have us blended alive. Considering we're the 10,008th test subject, you can probably figure out what happened to a good number of the previous participants, as grim as it is. Before we get smoothied, we get saved just in the nick of time by Agent 3, who finally makes their debut in this DLC. You can actually customize Agent 3 yourself after completing enough missions. If you have your own interpretation of what Agent 3 looks like, you're free to make it here. I personally tried to stick close to what I had back in the Splatoon 1 video, aka the Inkling Girl version. Their badassery is cut short, as they get knocked out from destroying the blender with just their body, good lord. Luckily, they had a CQ-80 on them with the blueprints of the whole facility. While Cuttlefish stays with 3 while they recover, 8 begins their escape to the surface. Thus begins the final challenges of the game. In order to make it to the top, you have to go through 7 different levels that are the culmination of everything you learn throughout the game. Starting out, you don't even have a weapon on you. As a first, there's a whole stealth section where you can't be spotted by any enemies unless you want to face a barrage of gunfire and bombs. With how being submerged in ink works in Splatoon, this ends up feeling very natural. I don't really have any complaints with this section, it's just pretty well designed. The atmosphere during this whole section feels intimidating, like you've now gone somewhere you were never meant to be in. It's by the second section that you start getting a means of fighting back, but I like how you get the splat bombs before you get any guns, forces you to put that throwing arm to the test. Once you finally get an Octo shot equipped, it's like a new sense of power flows within you, which soon leads you to the next area. By this point, the level design is holding nothing back. These are tightly knit together obstacle courses that'll make you use all your abilities and movement options to their fullest. There's even a number of new obstacles like these instant kill lasers. It can feel very tense to maneuver around them, but quick thinking and wit feels rewarded. All while during this, a new off the hook song is playing, Nasty Majesty. Most will likely recognize it from the trailer for Octo Expansion, but it's used just as well in the game itself. It has a very rebellious sound to it, extremely fitting for what's essentially a fancy prison escape. The second half of these levels gets a bit different. It starts with the final inkjet section of the game, and then an escort of this ball of energy, without having it get damaged too much. It can be a bit frustrating to deal with enemies, but as is familiar with Octo Expansion, it's better to think outside the box for what is the safest way forward. Also, don't miss out on these balloons, as they usually have good items in them. Another off the hook track is playing here called Shark Bites, a song that I love even more than Nasty Majesty. It's got a rebellious feel similar to that song, but the stakes just feel so much higher as I listen to this one. You are done being just another lab rat. Your chance at freedom is now, and nothing will stop you from having it. As the only original boss in the game, awaiting us at the 7th section is a possessed Agent 3. The telephone ended up sanitizing them with a green goop that also tied up Captain Cuttlefish, which is pretty standard now. There's a novelty about fighting a previous player character that I really love, and Sanitized Agent 3 scratches that itch perfectly, especially with the remix of Splatoon. Defeating Agent 3 cures them with a phone scoop, but they are once again knocked out. Finishing our ride up the elevator takes us to the outskirts of Ingopolis, very early in the morning. Pearl and Marina are there to pick us up, but since that boss wasn't climactic enough, the phone returns oozing with that green goop 3 was infected with. Its name is revealed to be Commander Tartar, an AI created by a professor long ago. If you've been keeping track of your Splatoon lore, you'll likely come to the conclusion that this is the same professor that put Jet away. Their mission was to pass down humanity's knowledge down to the next species worthy, but was repulsed at Inkling and Octoling society for their behaviors. So instead of that, they've decided to create a new life form themselves. One that's created from the ooze that's made from blending test subjects. It's not a stretch to say that all the enemies you face, including the humanoid Octolings, are all zombified versions of themselves, created from Tartar. Incredibly dark, even for Splatoon standards, but Tartar's next plan is pretty simple by comparison, and it's to fire a giant laser at Ingopolis with a giant statue that resembles a human. Like, oh my god, what a jump. Marina quickly devises a plan for how we're gonna stop this. Since the laser is being powered by sun rays, we'll have to ink the whole statue before it reaches max power. As unorthodox as it is, Agent 8 is experiencing their first turf war right here and now. As the final mission, we have to go around this whole statue and shoot all these bombs that'll explode ink. They'll all be sent in a sequential order, and you have only 3 minutes to shoot them all. You'll be going from one part of the bus to another until it ends with you circling the head on grind rails. I'll admit there is some trial and error to this whole finale. You're likely going to fail at least once, since you'll need more time to better understand where each set of bombs will end up, but once you understand what to do, this flow state starts getting developed. The urgency has never been higher in any of these story modes. You're no longer just fighting for a power source, you're fighting to save all of Ingopolis from complete annihilation. The song playing in the background, Fly Octo Fly, is a track that's been alluded to all throughout the game, as both the victory jingles for completing stations and collecting things. It would be the most hyped song in the whole game, if the next song didn't exist. During the last minute, we get a new rendition of what is arguably Off the Hook's most iconic song, Ebb and Flow. It acts as Off the Hook's equivalent to Calamari Incantation, but goddamn, I love this song so much more. Something about Off the Hook's vocals has so much more personality. Pearl's vocals are very quick and to the point, fitting for her status as a rapper, and the more rambunctious of the two. Marina's vocals often will hold notes for much longer, and generally sings more smoothly. Combining these two into one song makes for a track that has an endless amount of charm and hype behind it. Words don't do justice the goosebumps I get when this song is reaching its climax. It's been a long and difficult journey, but here we are, as this one Octoling is saving the world, while the 2 coolest cephalopods out there are singing their hearts out for you. The best finale for a Splatoon story yet, and one of my personal favorite finales for a game. Pearl's ridiculous laser battle with the statue being the icing on the cake. Tartar is defeated, and the day is saved. Agent 3 wakes up again, with Agent 8 greeting them with a warm smile, thus concluding Octo Expansion. The credits this time are really nice. You don't paint them like last time, but instead, you have all the main characters staring over the world that they just saved, and the new home of Agent 8. The different graphics for all the names of the teams is also quite cute. Finishing Octo Expansion, of course, lets you now use Octolings as your player avatar. I was an Inkling boy for most of my Splatoon life, but here I am now as an Octoling girl. The pipeline is real. Besides that though, there are some neat bonuses. There's now a vending machine in the central station, where you can spend CQ points. It'll randomly give you any bonus items from cash, food tickets, ability chunks, you get the idea. A bunch of stations previously played will now be marked, and if you go back there, you'll get a token, which is pretty much just for the vending machine. Yeah, it's not really that exciting. If you want to quote-unquote 100% Octo expansion, then you would be doing every single mission with every weapon possible for it. Don't do this. You only get like a named thing right there, and yeah, that's it. The more exciting bonus can be found when inspecting the 8th locker here. If you thought fighting against Agent 3 was too easy, well, here's the Super Boss version, Inner Agent 3. Besides the AI being a lot more aggressive and slippery to hit with its dodge rolls and it's annoying as hell, they now make frequent use of auto bombs, have 5 phases instead of 4, and have a new set of specials, which are often way more annoying to deal with. This is easily the hardest fight in the whole series, and you will die at least a couple of times before you get the fight down. A true final test of your skills, and finally beating it filled me with a great amount of satisfaction. This little golden toothpick here was the reward for all my hardships. Splatoon 2 Octo Expansion is my favorite DLC I have ever played for a game. Everything that the previous story modes did, this story mode does 10 times better. The plot and characters are far more entertaining, the lore it adds to the series is extremely interesting, the presentation and music is even more stylized than usual, and the level design and mechanics give us a challenge that kept me engaged all throughout. The difficulty may turn off some people. I definitely wouldn't recommend this as your return to Splatoon if you've been unfamiliar with this series for a while. This is for the people like me who have this insane love for Splatoon, or those who finished the story mode of 2 and wanted something much more from it. This is currently the peak of Splatoon single player, and I feel any fan of the series should give it a shot. I can only hope that Splatoon 3 story mode will continue to try new and creative things like Octo Expansion did. I don't think it will top this DLC, but as long as it's a fun time with its own original elements, I'm sure it'll be good. Regardless, that'll be a tale for later. Until then, make sure to stay fresh, and don't get cooked, stay off the hook. Looking back at all these story modes for Splatoon has been a really fun time. While the series is best known for its online multiplayer, the single player offerings have still been one of its most defining aspects. The first Splatoon gave us a pretty simple and easy story mode that was fairly short, but was still a solid experience. It proved that Splatoon's gameplay was also capable of being a 3D platformer, alongside an action game, with lore that made this world feel more alive than it already did. Splatoon 2 story mode continued the ideas the first game had. The hub worlds were larger, up to 10 weapons were available instead of 1, new bosses, and level design with far more interesting mechanics and design at play. The problem, however, was that the structure was the exact same as before, the story wasn't that different, it wasn't much harder, and the finale was New Super Mario Bros. Levels are rehashed. I still really enjoyed my revisit of it, but in the grand scheme of things, it's the least memorable story mode. Octo Expansion was when the single player of Splatoon truly came into its own, an incredible DLC campaign that blew the last two out of the water. I still highly recommend Octo Expansion to any Splatoon fan that has yet to play it. Its quality and care matches that of Splatoon's multiplayer. Splatoon 3 was announced in 2021, and with that meant a new campaign, Return of the Mammalians. We really didn't know much about it until the game was released. The marketing for the story was incredibly minimal, so a lot about it was kept in mystery. I was still really excited for it though, because I was really curious what they would do after Octo Expansion set a new standard. Well, Splatoon 3's been here for a bit now, having a firm grip on my life as I spend many hours on it, but I've been able to pry myself away from the game in order to make this video. I've had some time to let the story mode simmer in my brain, so let's start talking about it. Gonna preface now saying that there will be spoilers all throughout this video, so if you don't want to be spoiled, Without further ado, this is Splatoon 3, Return of the Mammalians. Yep, Back to the character creator we go to begin our journey. The best part about it this time is that none of the hairstyles or leg wear are gender locked. There are so many different combinations you can make now, and it's really nice. They don't even call it gender anymore, it's called style. These cephalopods defeated gender. Good for them. I know the canonical look of our new agent of this story is a feminine inkling with braids, and I know I've been sticking close to the canonical looks, but I want to change things up this time. This obviously has nothing to do with the fact that this footage is my first time booting up the game. My character creator is a feminine octoling with this awesome new hairstyle. Your new pet Samnit also has different hairstyles. I like this one. I really don't feel like going over the tutorial again, but just know that France has finally been obliterated, and we take the train to the new location of the game, Splatsville. If you want to know more about the geography of Splatoon, a map of the world was released. I really don't know why they doxed Agent 4, but there's some cool info here. Once we arrive in Splatsville, we're given a news broadcast from Deep Cut, the new idols of this game. The Great Zapfish, the main source for the city is mysteriously vanished. Oh no, I wonder where it could have gone. Oh, look at that! Captain Bald Cuttlefish at a manhole. I wonder what happens if we follow him. Oh wow! He says the Octarian army has stolen it. All because of the war that has happened like a century ago. We silently accept that we're going to help this weird old man, and now we're called Agent 3. Whoa! Small Fry is so cute, man. I wish I had my own little buddy. Equipped with the hero shots and hero armor, our journey begins anew. If you go to this drawing of the OG Agent 3, you can change their design. I wonder if that matters at all. There's not really much to say about the beginning of this game. These first 4 levels are incredibly short and act as basic tutorials. All you gotta do is get to the goal and collect the Zapfish. There are ink rails, keys, basic enemies. If you've at least played a bit of the past story modes, you'll know what to expect here. The most interesting addition is your Small Fry companion, who act as a sub-weapon that you throw to either repeatedly attack enemies like a Pikmin, or reach off far places. He's also got the best victory pose. I mean, look at him. He's also our key to getting rid of this goo. By clicking the right stick and throwing Small Fry, they'll absorb segments of goo that block our way in the overworld. It does, however, cost a certain amount of eggs each time. There is one quick communication we have with Agents 1 and 2 that's quite brief, along with an ominous voice. After the 4th kettle, we have our first boss of the game, which is surprisingly DJ Octavio himself. He claims his troops have gone missing and blames us for it, so now he's gonna beat us up with his giant mech. It's really cool how the final boss of Splatoon 1 and 2 is now the first boss of this game. Clears up any worries that they were gonna make Octavio the main baddie again. The fight itself is pretty easy, but it's a cool deviation from what we're used to with the first bosses. It's really clever how you had to throw a Small Fry into the vacuum whenever he activates it in order to clog it. There's not really much more that can be said about this fight other than it has a good spectacle. It's a solid beginner fight. After killing Octavio, except not, he says he didn't steal the Zapfish this time, and then the ground collapses as we get separated from Cuttlefish. The last shot we see is Deep Cut looking down from above. Now this is where the story mode actually begins. This is Alterna, the real world of this story mode. You quickly get introduced to Agents 1 and 2, and the new captain of the Squidbeak Splatoon, the original Agent 3. For clarity, I like to call our player Neo 3, but that's not really gonna matter. Instead of collecting Zapfish, our main goal is to search for Cuttlefish, which will lead us to the 6 sites of Alterna. The structure for this game combines many aspects of the previous campaigns, but feels completely different from what came before. Each site you visit is filled to the brim with fuzzy ooze. To clear it up, you'll need eggs, and the main way you'll be collecting eggs is through missions similar to Octo Expansion. Throughout the map you'll find these kettles that have challenges similar to those of the Deep Sea Metro, but instead of Sea Cucumber commanding us, the system is controlled by an AI known as Orca. Completing these missions reward you a certain amount of eggs that you'll use to clear up the ooze, opening up more areas of the map, which leads to more kettles. Rinse and repeat this cycle until all the missions have been cleared and all the fuzz is gone. You don't even have to do all the kettles in a site to progress. You simply need to clear a path to the next site, and or reach a boss kettle if there's one on there. There's a lot of freedom given with this new structure. If you just want to finish the story as quickly as possible, all you need to do is get enough eggs to reach each destination and you're good. If you're someone like me though, you're going to be playing every single level and clearing up every single part of the map. These are easily the best designed hub worlds the series has had. The environments are a lot more organic than the floating platforms of Octo Valley and Canyon. These feel like actual locations that you're exploring. There's a good incentive to explore too, as not only are kettles all around the maps, there are silken scrolls hidden about, CDs to add more to the background music, items to use in your locker, many eggs hidden in the ground, and lastly, Sardinium you can use to upgrade yourself. The addition of a skill tree to this game is very nice. There's technically the additional currency to use for the skill tree, but you literally just have to play the game when the points go up, so it doesn't really matter. This system is a good way of making it feel like your character is progressing throughout the story, but you're also free to disable your upgrades if you really want to. Most of these collectibles are buried in the ground, but if you throw small fry around, that rhymed, they can detect collectibles and will move towards them. I was surprised at how addicting it became to explore each site. In the Octo Valley and Canyon campaigns, all I really cared about was reaching the next level. Platforming through the areas to find the next level was never all that engaging to me, even when they made each area more complex in its design too. The sites in this game stick out in their own right as being engaging areas to explore and sink my teeth into. This is all without even covering the kettles themselves. When it comes to the levels in this game, it's basically Octo Expansion 2. Before starting, you're given up to 3 different choices for weapons. This once again acts as a difficulty selector, as the challenges offered can be much easier or harder depending on what you pick. If you want to go the easy route, a number of missions will offer you your hero shot, which keeps any upgrades you give it. For this playthrough, I always pick the rightmost option as an attempt to always have the most challenging experience. This ended up working pretty well because I'm just going to be straight with it. Return the Mammalians is nowhere near as hard as Octo Expansion, and I wasn't expecting it to be. This campaign is meant for both veterans and newcomers, so of course they couldn't make it super difficult. Armor is super plentiful, and the skill tree ensures that you'll be more capable as things go on. Fees to play levels are also basically non-existent. Not only do a number of them have no cost, but the fees are nothing compared to the triple-digit fees of before. The missions in this game are designed with the intention of teaching you how to play Splatoon, like Octo Valley and Canyon, but the difference here is that the Octo Expansion format allows for a much better job at doing that. First off, the weapon variety is still as strong as it was in Octo Expansion. Every weapon in the game will become available to play at some point, and most challenges take advantage of their unique properties. While the levels aren't always challenging, they're at the very least creative. Most types of challenges Octo Expansion had are back, like shooting down targets on rails or limited ink, but Splatoon 3 manages to think of new ways to use your abilities, or puts a spin on previous challenges. Instead of a challenge where you have to avoid getting hit, there's now a mission based around surviving these shockwaves based on the Weight-Breaker special. It's not as hard as the Octo Expansion equivalent, but it manages to feel fresh. The curling bomb takes on a new life here with puzzles requiring you to ricochet them off walls to their desired location, or to make a path forward when you're not able to touch ink. This mission raised my anxiety and was actually really challenging. It was interesting, if not somewhat annoying. Missions where you have unlimited access to a special make a return. The crab tank has this fun challenge where you climb a robot to take down all its parts, and did a pretty good job of making me realize all that this special can do. The special that definitely gets the most love this time is the Zipcast. I mean, with the fact that it's basically a hookshot that allows you to stick to walls and zoom to pretty much any surface, this thing feels almost made for the single player. There's a good number of missions starring it, and it's always a joy to use. Learning it so well here made me pretty great at it in the multiplayer. It's definitely not the best special in the game, competitive wise, but dang is it the one that I've had the most fun with. The Inkjet was the poster special for Octo Expansion, and it does return here for one mission, but it's just not the same. Its movement is way stiffer and a lot more sluggish as a result. It's missing that fluid movement that made it so fun to use beforehand. Not a big deal since you only use it once, but look how they massacred my boy. It's really this mode where I figured out how to use the angle shooter, or as I like to call it, the Markiplier. It's a pretty creative new sub-weapon that's unlike any other. Well, I guess there's a point sensor, but this one's cooler, I swear. Platforming remains an important aspect to many levels, and the level design is the tightest it's ever been. All the previous platform mechanics are back and still manage to feel as fresh as ever. It feels like there's always something more to level design than merely showing off a mechanic. There's that design philosophy of introduce something safely and then raise the stakes, but things are still changed up enough at the time to keep you on your toes. I know I said this game isn't to the level of Octo expansion in difficulty, but some missions with certain weapons can definitely be a pain. This balloon challenge using the Squiffer is super tight with a time limit. It took a few tries and I cut it really close when I finally got it. The Matchmaker mission returns, where you recreate a statue by breaking these boxes into the right shape, and I was about as good at them as I was the last time. It's neat that you have the Zipcaster to get a better view at your reference and to get to the top of your recreation, but I had the Splat Charger when using this, and I had some very dumb moments. You don't have a bomb strapped to you this go around, but instead, Orko will just pour a bunch of ink on you, instantly killing you. Thanks, buddy. Some missions could get somewhat annoying, but that's just how it is with the structure. Heck, considering you only need a certain amount of eggs to progress, you can simply skip any levels you don't like. It's similar to collectibles like Mario 64, where you don't gotta do every mission unless you want to. Not counting the bosses and the starting area, there's a total of 63 kettles in the game. Being the Splatoon fan I am, of course I did all of them, and it was pretty great. But Octo Expansion, they fully cracked how to design fantastic Splatoon levels and challenges, and that is carried over here. There's no super boss once you finish every mission here, but instead, you're rewarded with an extra level called After Alterna, the longest and hardest level in the whole series. This level's got tight platforming, demanding balloon challenges, and ends with a giant enemy gauntlet against rival Octarians that may give some Girl Power Station flashbacks to those still traumatized from that experience. There's no orb to protect, but it goes on for a while, and it's easy to get overwhelmed by them all. They also throw a crap ton of wave breakers and other specials at you. It's nothing impossible since you have access to specials of your own, and I did do it on my first try, but be prepared for one hell of a bloodbath. I still think I had more trouble beating Iteration 3 on my first try compared to this, but as a final challenge, well played Splatoon 3, well played. The Deep Sea Metro was such a fascinating addition to Splatoon's world, acting as the dark underbelly of what's otherwise a familiar society ruled by humanoid sea creatures. It's a place meant to entrap those unfortunate enough to end up there, and the murkier colors and bizarre landscapes encapsulated those feelings of helplessness and discomfort. The art direction for it truly was top notch. For how that has been followed up, the World of Alterna is one of a sanctuary that fell to ruins. Besides sunken scrolls, which are more what you expect by this point. Oh my god, look at them, please come back soon! The new method of delivering story comes with the Alterna logs, texts about the world that become more deciphered the more missions you play. They're a fantastic new source of lore, with a lot to read through. It's no secret by this point that Splatoon takes place in a post-apocalyptic Earth, and the lore put forward here pushes that to its logical extent. Surviving humans found shelter within an underground cavern deep below the Earth. Humanity began to grow again, as society rebuilt itself in part thanks to these unique liquid crystals found within squids, before humanity fell once more due to its own hubris, killing all humans once and for all, while the after effects of the disaster caused sea creatures to evolve until they reached the surface and created the world of Splatoon as we know it today. That's a very brief summary of the lore on display, because I don't want to repeat it all to you, but I love how much of the story is told visually. The artificial sky was created to give humans that sense of familiarity with the world. Most sites in the game have a very industrial feel to them. They remind me of places like power plants, Arctic labs, and shipping docks. The items you can collect for your locker are forgotten remnants of the human race, but the biggest takeaway from this has been people putting Easter Island heads in their lockers for the lulz. The surreal nature of the backgrounds for levels have a lot more context this time. It's humanity attempting to recreate the world they once knew. It's why a number of the themes have cities as backdrops, my favorite one being the neon city that reminds me of Spider-Verse. I also really like the direction they took for the final site of the game. What was seemingly a modern city has since been sunk into ruins, as you grind rail to each tower to access the next kettle. Besides the fast travel, you go to each site through these tubes that you speed to the next location with. While it's not technically one big map like Octo Valley, this is the most the hub worlds in a Splatoon game have felt connected since then. Each time you travel through these tubes, you get a good look at the massive rocket station in the center that's completely coated in fur. A great set piece for the whole story, and obviously where the finale will be. Our main cast for this game is pulled right out of Splatoon 1. The Squid Sisters are your guides all throughout, and I think out of every story mode so far, I actually caught more of what they were saying during levels, and there were some pretty good exchanges. There was probably stuff like this in Octo Expansion as well, but the challenge of that game made it harder to pay attention. The Squid Sisters are still my least favorite of the 3 auto groups, but I still love them in their own way, and I appreciate that this story mode gave them some more to offer. Despite not being a player character since 1, Agent 3 remains mute with Marie there to occasionally say whatever they mumble. There's a charm to how they're portrayed, and though there's not too much, I don't know, Agent 3 is pretty cool. Neo 3 is just kind of here to do all the work. There's not really any characterization, or maybe there is, I don't know. I look forward to seeing all those different headcanons and interpretations y'all have for this agent. There's a clean canvas for y'all to paint here. The best inclusion character-wise for this story mode is definitely Deep Cut. Unlike Off the Hook, who had to wait to the DLC to be featured in a story mode, Shiver Fry and Big Man are here from the get-go, which I am very happy about. They've got a really interesting role here as well, with a Team Rocket type of characterization. They want Arturna all to themselves to loot whatever treasure may be found here, and are the main bosses you'll be fighting every other site. Besides Agent 3, we haven't had new bosses since base Splatoon 2, so it's good to finally see creative new bosses again. I like how you're fighting actual characters this time around, instead of giant machines. You got Shiver and Fry piloting and commanding their own unique creatures, and Big Man is straight up a Super Mario Sunshine reference that I'm afraid I have no connection with because I hardly played that game. When it comes to the music of stages and the overworlds, Return of the Mammalians has my favorite OST of any story mode. Instead of having a single overall theme that builds up as you continue, each side in this game has its own theme. I really enjoy the vibe Side 3 goes for. Despite snow being a constant, Side 3 is the closest to an ice level, and the track has such a chilled out feeling to it. I think Side 6 is my favorite of these themes though. You can tell the stakes are rising as you reach the final hub of the game, and the most ruined of them all, but that won't stop this theme from being a jam. The level themes heavily embrace the techno direction Octo Expansion set, but I think these tracks feel a lot more realized and fleshed out than before. A number of the level themes in that campaign were a little bit too simple for my taste, despite how much I enjoy them. I played a number of themes in the background already, but I want to give special attention to this theme. It has no right being as catchy as it is, and it's kind of become a meme at this point, but dang, do I love the song that goes bing bing bang bang. I'm going to get it out of the way now while I'm doing this part, but Deep Cut songs for the final stages were a delight, and up there with the best of Off the Hook. They get me hyped up like Nasty Majesty and Shark Bites, but they still have their own flair. I can't get enough of it. I feel like I've exhausted enough of what I could say before diving fully into the endgame, so I'll stop beating around the bush and get to that now. For anyone that's played Octo Expansion, this finale is going to be extremely familiar. After each Deep Cut boss, you collect a piece of a giant machine that's used to destroy the fur covering the rockets, allowing us to finally reach it, as it's supposedly the location of Cuttlefish. Oh yeah, he got kidnapped again, but well, whatever. Deep Cut once again return, but it's cleared up that we don't really care about whatever treasures they want, and they feel remorse for trying to murder us, and so they join our side for a narrative that I'm not even sure they were aware of. Instead of 7 different areas for the final gauntlet of levels, we have about 4. They still got that climactic feel to them, but are certainly much easier than Octo Expansion's final levels. You start out weaponless like last time, but you still got Small Fry with you, and he's all you really need to be a menace to any enemy you come across, until you finally get your gear back. The music is fantastic here like I've already said before, and there's a great final segment involving the Zipcaster, where you climb this tower and collect all these energy spears. You really can make an entire game out of this thing. Reaching the top of the rocket reveals what happened to Cuttlefish, as he's been returned back to an old-fashioned squid, with the reveal of the mastermind behind all of this, Mr. Grizz. Yeah, that guy from Salmon Run is here, and my first thought that came to mind when this was revealed earlier on in the plot was,
who's gonna sign my paycheck?
There's a massive lore dump for this guy in the extra log you get after finishing After Alterna. It goes really in depth to his origins, and even ties into a Salmon Run map in Splatoon 2. I can't deny that I was heavily reminded of Tartar's plan in Octo Expansion during this finale, since it's basically the same planet trying to blast the world with a substance created in their image, but there's enough unique about it to keep it separate in my head. It helps that you end up going to space, which is always a cool set piece for any finale. The final boss itself is also a decent challenge. It starts pretty simple, but phases get more dangerous as they go on, and the music is a delightfully intimidating remix of Salmon Run's main theme. As a design, Grizz is also weirdly appealing. I think it's the dichotomy of this hulking beast with claws that can shred you to pieces, with the teddy bear face. It's weirdly charming. The second phase is kinda clunky on the other hand. It's surprisingly easy to grasp how they control this vehicle, but I think it ends up being too much of a deviation from Splatoon's gameplay. I think painting Tartar's statue was a much better timed challenge, that was better timed with the music as well. This is a great rendition of Calamari Incantation though, I just want to make that clear. My favorite part of this final section is that Octavio joins you as an ally. His role as a main antagonist only really worked in Splatoon 1 if you ask me. Making him a smaller scale rival or ally, similar to characters like King Deity or Bowser and a number of the RPGs, works a lot better to me. Small Fry evolving into a huge Samnid to have a Godzilla fight with Grizz was kind of out of nowhere, but it's fun and goofy, and that's always been a part of Splatoon. Heck, I guess if you want to make up some sort of reason, Calamari Incantation has supposedly had very magical qualities to it, so yeah, it's just magic now. I still believe Octo Expansion has the best finale of any Splatoon game, from the set pieces and how well it escalates, but this finale is no slouch either. Does a lot more than the first two story modes, even if I think the original fight with Octavio remains the best final boss in the series by itself. Once Grizz gets brutally murdered and the Earth is saved, we get our usual newscast about the Great Zapfish returning. There's this little bit about Deep Cut realizing Agents 1 and 2 are actually the Squid Sisters, kinda brings things full circle since that was originally a twist in Splatoon 1. They play the newest single by the Squid Sisters, and that ends the story mode of Splatoon 3. Splatoon 3 is a game that I feel like had to do a lot to prove itself. Splatoon 2 was the game that already existed, with a campaign that did everything a good single player experience should accomplish with the series. I think what makes Splatoon a unique case with sequels is that despite being an online game first, the game still offers an incredibly in-depth world, with so much lore behind it, and many charming characters people have grown attached to throughout the years. Once I actually got to play the game myself, it's easily the best Splatoon game yet. Everything just feels so much better, and so many parts of the game have been subtly reworked that ended up going a long way in making this game a great step up. When comparing the story modes of all the games, Return of the Mammalian certainly tops the story modes of Octo Valley and Canyon. But Octo Expansion remains the best campaign in the series. Splatoon 3's campaign is definitely more accessible, while the other is more for veterans, but I'm sorry, Octo Expansion was the peak of everything I wanted for a single player mode in Splatoon. The challenge was great, the variety in missions was off the charts, the setup and narrative is still the best, Pearl and Marina are the two best Splatoon characters, the fight against Agent 3, Flag to Fly, Ebb and Flow Octo, and Into the Light are the best Splatoon songs we've ever been graced with. It's just too hard to beat. I wasn't expecting this to top Octo Expansion, but that doesn't change how surprised I was at how good it still was. As a platformer action game by Nintendo, this is a fantastic part of Splatoon 3 that I recommend both newcomers and veterans play through. Despite the direct calling this the end of a saga, we seemingly still aren't done with single player content. They've already announced that there'll be a paid DLC, which we safely assume will be something like Octo Expansion. All we know is that it'll involve Pearl and Marina, and that already makes it peak by default. That's still looking pretty far off, so for now, that wraps up my marathon of covering single player Splatoon. It's been quite a ride, I gotta say, and I thank anyone who stuck around for the whole thing. I'll return to talk about a new story mode someday, but until then, thanks for watching.